Welcome. Did you know that out of Facebook's nearly 1 billion members, not one is under age 13? Well, not officially anyway. That would be against Facebook's policy. But little kids are a huge market, and today we will hear how the social network is thinking about bringing them openly into the revenue stream. Also today, we meet a comic book hero who saves new immigrants from a scam. We visit a website that preserves the controversial tweets that politicians delete, and we meet the founder of a new e-version of the old Book of the Month Club. We read, she decides. First, though, Facebook. Now that the company has stockholders, it is reportedly looking to grow by somehow safely signing up billions of children without setting off parents and privacy alarms. Anton Troyanovsky wrote about this for the Wall Street Journal. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
First, remind us what the rules are with respect to age and Facebook.
Right now, Facebook's terms of service prohibit kids under 13. So you have to be at least 13 years old to sign up.
And what are the reasons for that prohibition? What are the worries?
Well, I mean, the biggest reason for it being specifically 13 is a legal one. There's a law called the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which was passed back in 1998, that prohibits websites from gathering personal information from children without their parents' approval. So without, Facebook never wanted to deal with that when they started the site, and so that's why they have that 13 barrier.
What do we know about how many kids under 13 actually do use Facebook?
Well, it's a lot. Last year, there was a Consumer Reports study that said it was 7.5 million. But there are a ton of different, if you look at market research reports where they ask kids, what's your favorite website? You go down as young as 8, 9 years old. Mm-hmm. Facebook is at or near the top.
Meaning they are on under their identities in some way.
Yes. But probably, they are lying about their age to do it.
Right. How hard is it for them to get past that? Is it just, you're 9 years old, you have to write in 14, and you do it?
Yeah, I think that's it.
What are they looking for mostly on Facebook?
I think the biggest thing is that everyone else is doing it. And, obviously once you get to 11 or 12, you might have older friends who are on Facebook legitimately, and you want to join them. Parents are on Facebook. That was one of the interesting things that actually came out in another study last year, is that many parents approve of their underage kids being on Facebook and actually help them lie about their age to get on it.
Why?
I think it shows just how ingrained Facebook has become in our society.
Right, because on one level, it's not a threatening thing. It's a platform on which to connect with your friends.
Right.
And if other people are doing it, then there you are. But there's this whole other world out there. And now Facebook wants to try to get at that revenue stream. That's the news here, right?
Right. It's something they've been working on for a year at least. Talking about and trying to develop technologies that would create some kind of safe zone in which kids can exist legitimately on Facebook. The biggest probably aspect to that would be that kids' and parents' accounts would be linked, and parents would be able to approve, for example, friends that their kids want to make or apps that their kids want to use.
So is it a coincidence that the Facebook IPO just came out? It's already down $10 a share or whatever it is today, and suddenly we hear about legitimizing children on Facebook as customers?
I think, yes, it is a coincidence. Having reported the story and knowing that this is something that they were working on for a year, and I sort of happened to stumble upon it a few weeks ago. But at the same time, I think there's no question that Facebook faces a lot of concerns about its ability to grow and its ability to both gain access to new users and to new revenue streams. And so if you think about it very broadly, kids' entertainment is a huge pile of money in the US economy. And right now, Facebook is basically not getting any of that. So if they figure out new ways to get at this, that'd be important. But I think at the same time, a lot of their concern comes from the policy issues that we were talking about.
But is that to say that games would be the main marketing device, selling games to kids through Facebook?
I think if it comes to making money, that could well be a big part of it. I mean, we sort of have to speculate at this point because Facebook hasn't gone out and said anything. And as far as I know, they're still working on it. And it's not even clear whether or not they'll actually go ahead with it. But yeah, various kinds of content and games, I think, would be more important in an under 13 world on Facebook, in part because it's so complicated to advertise to kids, given all the laws that are out there.
Right, because they make most of their money through advertising sales, right? Because the adults will see the ads, and if the advertisers know they're going to click through, or General Motors has decided they don't click through enough and then wind up buying General Motors cars, so they pull their $10 million Facebook buy.
Right.
But it's not going to work that directly with kids. On the other hand, kids' television shows advertise to children, and the children have to go through the parents in order for the product to be bought, so maybe it would be advertising too.
It certainly can be done, but I mean, Facebook's advertising model is all about collecting all this data from the user and using that data to target ads. So with kids, you have to go back to this law, COPA, which prohibits personally identifiable information from being gathered. So
Children's Online, COPA?
Children's Online Privacy Protection Act of 1998. That law is being reviewed right now by the FTC. They're looking to sort of redo it for kind of this age of social media. And we know that Facebook has been involved in lobbying that.
So is Facebook trying to get a law or a policy changed?
Well, they're lobbying it. We don't know exactly what their position is, but they're certainly very cognizant of the fact that that's happening, and I think anything that they do in the kids space will be influenced by how that law review comes out.
Have you reported on any horror stories? Kids who wound up victimized in any way at all, from very small to very large, via being on Facebook and not realizing what perils were out there?
I haven't personally, but I think we all know the stories that are out there, and that's going to be a huge challenge for Facebook to figure out, because they're not looking to create like a separate website for kids. They want kids to be able to have accounts, but accounts that somehow have all these buffers from that sort of rough and tumble and sometimes dangerous world that's out there.
Right. How is it different from websites? I mean, Facebook is a website, but how is it different from other things? Kids may be going on to their sports website or the website affiliated with the TV shows that they like. Facebook is different because it's social. How does it change the danger equation?
Well, you're suddenly interacting not with this, carefully curated website, something that has one big name behind it, or something that has people behind it who know how to do kids entertainment. You're suddenly dealing with a website that has millions of users who create their own content. That's the appeal, but that's also absolutely the risk, especially for kids who don't really get it all.
So what's your prediction? Will this come to pass?
I think so. I think you look at last week after our story ran on Monday, and in the days that followed, some of Facebook's Facebook has a safety advisory board, and some of those advisors actually came out and publicly started talking about it, about a Facebook service for kids and the fact that Facebook has been working on it. There was an op-ed in the Washington Post on Friday about this, so I think they're certainly sending signals and trying to get people comfortable with the concept.
All right, Facebook for kids may be the next thing in your household. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And up next, a document that could make all the difference to the undocumented. It's a serious comic book.
When you earn your GED diploma, the barriers in your life fall. Earn your GED diploma and begin your brighter future.
My next guest says that Roosevelt Avenue in Queens is a hotbed of predatory, substandard, and sometimes fraudulent practices targeting immigrants. So Valeria Treves helped to come up with a simple comic book that clearly and graphically warns immigrants of scams that steal their money and their dreams of making it in America. Treves is executive director of NICE, that's New Immigrant Community Empowerment. Welcome back.
Thank you, Ryan.
Is this a big problem, scams to especially the undocumented?
Scams are a big problem in the community. If you walk along Roosevelt Avenue as an example of an immigrant enclave, because you can find strips like this in other neighborhoods as well, throughout the country actually, you'll see a number of services that are targeting the immigrant community, from lawyers, unscrupulous lawyers, sometimes notarios, immigration service providers, but also employment agencies, remittance agencies, travel agencies, phone cards. There's been all sorts of illegal activities within these range of services that target immigrant workers and immigrant families.
And we're going to show in a minute some panels from the comic book,
Great.
And you'll be able to see how you're educating people about it. But let's talk a little bit about what some of the most common kind of scams are. Sure. I presume getting you legal documentation would be one.
Yeah, so this is what we're actually calling this is a graphic novel. And this is a style that's very popular in Latin America and in Latino communities broadly. So this graphic novel is what we hope to be the first in a series. José busca legalizarse, or José seeks legal status, is focused primarily on scams and immigration services. So a very common scam is, for example, they promise you papers and they may get you a work permit, but then it turns out you don't qualify to adjust your status. Or for example, there's anything in the news regarding some kind of legalization program or amnesty, and an unscrupulous provider will let you know, oh, I have a sign-up sheet. Or for example, special connections to the government they claim that they have. All sorts of things that immigrants don't actually qualify for, but because of their situation, providers take advantage of it.
And the more they know you don't qualify, the more it's a scam if they, quote, try to help you.
And the other thing that may happen is that they don't file anything for you. So for example, they'll be taking your money and actually not doing anything for you. In some ways that can be better because if you're going to fall under a scam, because if you do file the wrong paperwork with immigration, you could fall prey to starting to go into deportation proceedings.
So we saw the cover of the comic book. Now we're going to start going through the panels. We're going to do a televised reading of a 13-panel graphic document starting right now. And so let's see panel number 1. And Valeria, you're going to walk us through this.
Sure.
Tell us who the characters are over there on the left.
So the main character is Jose. He's the one that's standing on the right-hand side, sort of leaning against the taco truck. And I want to say that all these images are from photographs that we took of our community members that posed as actors in our community. So that's literally on Roosevelt Avenue around the corner from our office. We go to that taco truck a lot. And the other one is just another community member that's asking him, you know, how are you doing? And what Jose is explaining is that, well, you know, this is page 2, actually.
Yeah, actually, I think we jumped in the middle.
Yeah.
Page 5.
So, well, do you want me to just...
Yeah, you just keep going from where we are.
All
so
right.
give us the background.
Sure. So the background is that this person wants legal status. He's been on the phone with his wife. His wife misses him. His children misses him. And he goes to a lawyer that tells him, hey, Jose, there's nothing you can do. There's absolutely nothing right now to help you in your situation. So he's talking to a friend of his that says, hey, don't worry. I actually do know somebody who can get you status. The guy I know is really good. So, and that's how the story sort of evolves.
So already there's a scam
So,
at work.
right. So
Next
then the
panel.
next day, as you notice, el otro día con otro abogado, the next day he goes with a lawyer. Notice the word abogado is in quotations. We don't actually find out if this person actually is a lawyer. There's some people that pass themselves off as lawyers. They may be notarios or others. And there are actually unscrupulous lawyers as well. So this unscrupulous provider provides a very different scene for Jose. He tells Jose, don't worry about it. I can get this for you. I will charge you $7,000 for the paperwork. And the faster you pay me, the faster I can get you your papers. I'll need at least $1,200 cash. Notice the use of the cash to begin. And
How about the look of the office? Are there clues in that?
Not really. Like I said, these are all models, and we actually used our own offices at the community center.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so not really. I wouldn't say so.
Let's come back to the studio
Yeah.
for a second and linger on one of those points. You talked about the notarios,
Yeah.
notary publics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of confusion in the Latino communities in particular about
Yeah.
that with respect to lawyers.
Yeah, in Latin American countries, a notario is a well-regarded and high-up lawyer. So in this country, a notary can only sort of certify who you are and check your ID, etc. But unscrupulous persons will sort of prey on that confusion, and immigrants may believe they're actually talking to a lawyer when they're simply talking to a notary public.
All right, so let's go back into the
Sure.
story. I think we're going to be up to panel 8, and there it is.
Okay, it's jumping around a little bit, but okay, so the unscrupulous providers tells him that he can do it for him. About a month later, he finds something in his mailbox saying that he got his work permit. So he's very happy. He calls his wife. Not only that, but he tells all his friends what a great service provider he's found, and all his friends are going to access this same service provider. However, after getting his work permit, he gets denied by immigration. The reason he gets denied by immigration is that though he was able to secure a work permit, he doesn't qualify to adjust his status. So now he's outed himself to the authorities. He's turned in documents that he wasn't supposed to turn in. And, he's sort of freaking out at this point because immigration has sent him this letter saying, why did you apply for that? You don't qualify.
So that could actually wind up in him getting onto their radar screen and getting deported when he was flying under the radar previously.
Potentially, yes.
Would a scrupulous lawyer helping an undocumented immigrant often advise not to apply for legalization
Yeah.
specifically for that reason?
If you don't qualify, you don't qualify. There are many barriers to changing your status in this country. A lot of immigrants, they may not speak English. They know, for example, the word 245I. 245I was a law that passed that allowed people that crossed the border in a clandestine fashion to be able to adjust their status. 245I only helps people that somebody petitioned for them before 2001. So for everybody else who's crossed the border since, unless they have a very specific circumstance, there's absolutely no chance for them to adjust their status. So what we need out there in the community is sort of fraud prevention measures where community lawyers, community advocates, and people that are trying to help the community will let immigrants know, listen, unfortunately at this point you have no chance of changing your status, even if you get a work permit, even if you marry a U.S. citizen. The circumstances are hard. This is why we have 12 million undocumented people in this country.
Let's go back into the comic book. I think this is panel 9. I hope we have our numbers coordinated now.
All right, so he's been denied. So now he's calling the unscrupulous provider. The name was Jimenez. And the phone is ringing and ringing and ringing, and there's no reply. So he runs over to the place where he got the service. As you can see, it's a multi-service agency. You can see it in the little window right there. They do everything there, from notary services, copies, taxes, calls, and also immigration services. They do everything under one roof, and this is very common. And he now notices that these offices are closed. Another problem with some of these services that is sort of the fly-by-night nature of them, right? So they'll defraud a number of people and then close office and move somewhere else. This is also a problem with the employment agencies in our community. Yeah, so now he's looking for this guy, Jimenez, and he can't find him. So he returns to the original lawyer that gave him the bad news. And I don't know if we have that panel.
Can we just go right on?
Well, okay, let's move on. So he goes back to the first lawyer. The first lawyer explains again, Jose, you don't have any possibilities unless you've been a victim of trafficking, asylum, etc. You really have no opportunities right now. Jose asks the lawyer, what can I do now? I just want to get my money back. And the good lawyer The good lawyer advises him to report with the authorities, the Attorney General's offices, so that he could at least recuperate his money and also prevent other frauds from happening to other people in the future. In the final scenes, he's talking to his friends, and they're saying it's very sad what happened to you, Jose. They've lost one of their friends since. The guy that first advised them to go to the unscrupulous provider has now gone missing. They fear that he might have gone into deportation. And so at the very end of the novela gráfica, they're talking about what can we do to avoid this type of fraud. And Jose finally gives a series of tips or recommendations on how to avoid fraud.
I think we're going to see the tips. There you go. And why don't you tell us what some of these are, because that's, of course, the best service that we can provide. Maybe people have been seeing this kind of thing here right now for the first time. How do you avoid that? How do your loved ones and friends avoid that?
Sure. So there's a number of red flags and a number of tips that immigrants should know about. First of all, you should only seek legal advice from a lawyer. Notaries and other persons that aren't lawyers are not allowed to give you legal advice. We encourage not to have immigrants have their immigration form filled out with anyone but a lawyer. Only a lawyer should be filling out your immigration forms. Other things, also don't believe that all lawyers are good lawyers either. So you should also check that person's record, not only amongst your friends, but by calling the Bar Association, AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and other reputable institutions that could help you out in that regard. Another sort of red flag is if they give you a total cost and don't detail the cost that you're getting. Another huge red flag is if they ask you for payments in cash. USCIS, the government does not accept cash, so don't give all your money in cash. You should be making some checks or money order to USCIS and some to the provider themselves. You should have a written contract or a retainer. Nothing should just be on a spoken word. And the other big thing is guarantees. So USCIS can always deny you. So if a provider or a lawyer is telling you that they're going to guarantee you something, it's most likely a fraud. They should explain to you what could go well and what could go wrong as well. The other thing out there is agencies that describe themselves as fundaciones, foundations, asociaciones, misiones. Sometimes these are large sort of institutions that are passing themselves off as nonprofits, but are really out there to defraud immigrants. You should always get a contract in your language that you understand. And if people do have problems, they should contact the Attorney General's office and also the Department of Consumer Affairs.
So those are all tips for individuals.
Yes.
What about at the policy level? Do you advocate that the city or state or federal government do things about these scams, which you're telling us are so common, that they're not doing now?
Yeah. So both the Attorney General's office and the Department of Consumer Affairs are already active on this issue.
State?
At the state and at the city level. We, however, feel that there's still a lot going on. We've actually engaged in a participatory research project where our membership has gone out and sort of documented the conditions in the community. We've engaged in surveys, et cetera, and we have a report coming out next month that includes policy recommendations. So there's a lot more to do in terms of more tightly defining what it means to exercise immigration law, more tightly defining a ban for immigration law that in our opinion should include the filling out of formularies or petitions to immigration that should only be done by lawyers. There's more that can be done in terms of regulatory agencies coming closer to the community. So sometimes they work by waiting for people to put in claims. It's hard to get down to downtown Manhattan. People are fearful. And if you come to immigrant enclaves and strips, often people know who the bad providers are, right? That's common knowledge in the community. Attorneys in the community begin to realize this. So regulatory agencies need to do more in terms of reaching out to places where this is happening and having targeted enforcement programs. The DA's office can also be more active. Manhattan DA has a program. Queens DA should develop a similar program as well.
Do you think they're not as responsive as they might be because the target victim community is people who are undocumented, not here legally?
Well, I don't want to make assumptions about sort of the priorities, but I do think this needs a lot more attention than it's getting. Oftentimes, the regulatory agencies have gone after large providers or large institutions, but we need to do something about the small institutions as well and be very creative about how to get in there for very informal settings and people becoming victims in these small places as well.
So this graphic novel is about scams. You have another one.
This one is about immigration scams in particular. We are hoping to create more of these. This is a series called Avíspate y Ponte Pilas, which means watch out and beware. And we do have an Indiegogo campaign to raise money for it, so I just want to pitch that if that's okay. People could make a search for it. The next one we want to do is José Busca Trabajo. So José is looking for a job. This is going to focus on the problems with employment agencies that we have in our community. The number one problem is the non-rendering of services. So people will go to an agency, they'll pay a fee, and then never get a service rendered. Under the law, they're supposed to provide you a contract. They're not doing that. They're supposed to refund you. They're not doing that as well. They're sometimes sending immigrants to bogus addresses that don't exist. And finally, they cannot place you into a job that's breaking minimum wage and hour laws. And that's happening a lot too.
Are you supposed to not pay a fee to an employment agency unless you get a job?
Well, this is a huge loophole in terms of legislation and regulation, and this is actually going to be part of our recommendations. Right now, employment agencies are only supposed to charge you a placement fee once they found you a job, unless you're a low-wage worker. There's two categories of worker called Class A and A1, which includes domestic workers, construction workers, many restaurant workers, and they can charge you an advance fee only for these types of workers. So more administrative or clerical or let's say accounting workers, they don't have to pay these fees, only when they get placed.
The less money you have, the more they can charge you.
It's very vulnerable immigrants, persons that are earning very low wages that are having to pay these advance fees. And what we're seeing in some of the business models of these agencies is that they're living just off of these advance fees.
So why comic books? Why graphic novels? Why not just regular printed pamphlets that would be cheaper to produce and easier to distribute?
Yeah. So this is a very emotional issue and a very tough issue when somebody is having these conversations with their partner back home, with their wife, their husband, with a service provider that's tricking them in very particular ways. And we feel that a list of do's and don'ts often is not enough. You have to meet the person where they're at. You have to understand the emotions that they're going through. And the novela gráfica, the graphic novel, provides an emotional storyline, strong visuals, simple language that really meets the reader where they're at, and it's we think, a very innovative and good educational tool.
Indeed, sympathy, emotional connection. Whose art is it?
The artist is Alfredo Lopez. He has been a volunteer with our organization for a while, and he's in Astoria, and he's a City Tech student.
And how do you distribute it? Do you go on to targeted street corners?
Yeah. So we had our official lunch about 2 weeks ago. We were fortunate enough to get a full spread in the largest Spanish language daily, El Diario. And there we announced 5 different distribution spots throughout the city, which are sister organizations. People have been going to these different distribution sites, and some of them are already gone. Our own membership is going out into the corners, the street corners, the daily work corners, and distributing them. And like I said, we've already distributed over 2,000. We hope to print more with people's support, and yeah, people need this information.
And again, if people want to get in touch with you, either to contribute or maybe to get copies to distribute in their own neighborhoods?
They can call me or call my office at 718-205-8796, or they can go to our website,
Which is?
www.nynice.org.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Great
Brian.
service. Good luck.
Thank you.
Coming up after a break, PolitTwoops, the website that archives the tweets that politicians wish they could forget.
When you smoke around kids, you expose them to thousands of chemicals that are eating them alive. Cigarette smoke contains poisons like cyanide and carbon monoxide that trigger severe health problems, like painful ear infections, crippling asthma, and deadly pneumonia. Cigarette smoke is linked to low birth weight and doubles the risk of sudden infant death syndrome. Cigarettes are eating you and your kids alive. Quit smoking today. For help, call 311.
I'm lucky. Let me help you with that. I get to do something I love. It has nothing to do with touchdowns or titles.
Everybody bring it in.
I get to play a part in the life of someone just starting out.
How many of you think homework is just as important as teamwork?
I help keep kids in school.
Good.
And that's the name of the game.
My name is LaDainian Thomason. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Most politicians use Twitter now, and mostly to their benefit. But sometimes their tweets are offensive, inappropriate, or just plain wrong. Until now, Pauls could delete those regretted tweets with the click of a mouse. No longer. Transparency nonprofit the Sunlight Foundation has created a site called PolitTwoops. It archives tweets politicians try to remove from the record. Here, the director of Sunlight Labs, Tom Lee, to explain. Welcome.
Thanks.
First of all, did I say it right? PolitTwoops?
Yes, I think that's as close as any of us at Sunlight are coming, so I can't fault you for it.
There's politics in there somewhere, and there's whoops in there somewhere.
Right, and the TW for Twitter. It's that rare triple portmanteau.
Right, and the point is?
Well, the point's to capture tweets that have gone out under these public accounts, but which have then subsequently been deleted.
What kind of tweets are we talking about mostly here? Is this Anthony Weiner territory or things much short of that?
Well, of course, that's in the back of our minds as we develop the site. But no, most of them are really pretty banal. It's things like typos, leaving out a URL or pointing at the wrong URL, sometimes linking to a parody account instead of the actual elected official you mean to mention. But the most interesting stuff, it goes beyond that a little bit and can be a more intimate perspective on the individual or the staff member who's managing that account.
And are false or inaccurate or misleading or offensive or any of these categories of tweets common among leading politicians?
I wouldn't say common. We have come across, I think, at launch, and I should say when we launched, we had compiled an archive of about 6 months worth of tweets. We'd been running the site quietly before announcing it to the world. And when we launched, as you might imagine, reporters went through that. The most, let's say, salacious tweet that was in there was from a congressman from Florida named Jeff Miller, who his staff had tweeted out a link to a Facebook poll questioning whether or not the president was born in the United States. And this was probably the most politically charged of the tweets that are in our database. By and large, though, they're slice of life stuff, either the aforementioned typos or things like a politician sharing their thoughts on the Hunger Games movie or the fact that they're going on date night with their wife.
So what's the public purpose here? Is this just a gotcha site for gotcha's sake? Or give us the broader, overview in terms of where this fits in and serves the public.
I think that the motivation behind the site, and I should say the original idea came from a Dutch nonprofit called the Open State Foundation, which has launched this for about 2 years in the Netherlands. The idea really is just to recognize the growing importance of Twitter and other social media channels to the way that our elected officials speak to the public. Sunlight's actually spent a lot of time advocating for this, both through quiet efforts on Capitol Hill and through our more public Let Our Congress Tweet campaign, which reformed franking rules to make it possible for Twitter to actually be used by these offices. Now that it has been, though, and it's become an important channel for communication between elected officials and the people they represent, we think that it should be subject to the same scrutiny as other official channels. So records need to be preserved, they need to be accessible to everybody, they need to be open to journalists.
We have a page view that we're going to show from your site that's online right now. Let's put it up, and you tell us what we're looking at here. And I see members of Congress's names, plus Mitt Romney's name.
Right. So all of the tweets that are displayed on the site right now are things that have gone out over these public Twitter accounts and then been pulled back. We have right now between 400 and 500 accounts on the site. As you can see, not all of them are members of the House or Senate. Mitt Romney's in there. But by and large, these are campaign or official sites for representatives or senators. You can see that we have links back to the original account so that you can see this in context potentially. There's retweets and reply buttons, and there's some information about how quickly this was deleted, which sometimes can be pretty revealing.
So let's just go back, because I'm seeing this for the first time. If we could go back up toward the top and see what Romney deleted, or of course it wouldn't be him himself, it would be somebody from his team. Do you have a sense of what that is?
I'm having a little trouble reading it from here. It looks like he was retweeting somebody who was responding to another gentleman. Something about somebody's daughter who's 6 months old. Again, you know, this is not totally comprehensible to me, and that's not unusual for the site. There's a lot of stuff that just sort of accidentally went out. It's important to acknowledge, too, that a lot of these accounts are managed by social media professionals, not the officials themselves.
Right. So maybe what we're really learning about is the behaviors of some young and exhausted staffer rather than the politician, him or herself.
Yeah, actually, not too long ago, I had a conversation with someone who works in state government who said that when the site debuted, they'd spoken to that state's governor's social media expert who said she didn't know whether to cry about it or just quit right away. We hope that it's not quite that traumatic for people, and that really the public will come to understand through seeing this complete record that these are just human beings. They're using social media like you or me, and they make the same kind of mistakes.
What's another good recent example that comes to mind?
Of a deleted tweet?
Yeah.
You know, to be honest, it's more of a holistic picture, I think. I would encourage people to check out the site. Like I said, it's not so much the Anthony Weiner gotcha moments. Rather, it's just this completer perspective on how folks are engaging with Twitter and with the public record through these new media.
Let's go on to another one of your ideas, which I think is also great. At the Personal Democracy Forum here in New York this week, you are launching something called Scout.
Right.
Tell us about Scout.
Scout is in some ways a culmination of many years worth of work. Sunlight's about 6 years old, and we've been compiling more and more data about government during that time. And the way that we expose this is through systems that we call APIs that make it very easy for software developers to get at that information and reuse it. It's all free and accessible to anybody. Scout is an alert system that tries to harness that power for activists, reporters, and members of the public so that they can have a sort of Google Alerts for government that goes straight to their inbox when an issue of interest pops up, either in a regulation, on the floor of the House or Senate, or in any of the 50 state capitals around the country.
And so how searchable is that? Or I don't even know if searchable is the right word, because I think you're trying to set up a system by which activists interested in issues will get things automatically coming to them when politicians or government bodies do things. Is that correct?
Right. So the interface, the basic interface is very much like a search engine. You show up at the site and you put in some topic that you're interested in, and you'll see some sample results when you do. But the idea is that this allows you to refine the topic that you're searching on, and you can then set up an alert that will remain evergreen and deliver relevant results to your inbox.
And is technology just now approaching the point where this is doable? You couldn't do this 5 years ago?
Well, in some ways you could do it 5 years ago, but there's a lot of information that just hasn't been fully harnessed. And some of it is sort of the difference between putting something on the web that's accessible to humans and something that's accessible to machines. When you take that latter step, which is something that Sunlight spends a lot of time doing, you are able to provide these additional kinds of uses. So for instance, the congressional record is an official sort of transcript of what happens on the floor of the House and Senate. And you can download it as a PDF on a daily basis and see what your member of Congress had to say. It's accessible to human beings. You can view it in your web browser. It is not very accessible to computers. It's not split up and attributable to individual speakers. Sunlight's taken the time to write code that does do that splitting up and makes it really easy to figure out who's saying what. And that, in turn, lets us make it searchable through systems like this.
And so that's brand new as of this week,
right,
which means people can do what now?
Well, I think that now the fun begins. We want professionals and concerned citizens, policy professionals, I should say, to engage with this and to stake out their little corner of the activism world and basically have the cost of paying attention to what's happening in DC and state capitals reduced. One example of this actually is already come to fruition. Our policy folks at Sunlight are really interested in freedom of information laws and particular exemptions that are being proposed for FOI. So John Wunderlich, our policy director, set up an alert on Scout for the section of the US Code that deals with FOIA. And sure enough, a bill dealing with the FDA was poised to carve out a problematically broad exemption around drug information for FOI requests. He was able to spot this in a corner of the legislative world that he might not normally have paid attention to, get in touch with the NGOs that were working on this issue, and within 48 hours, the folks at openthegovernment.org and a bunch of other organizations were able to get that language corrected by the staff members responsible.
And is this just because it's like creating a section with your favorite keywords on Google News or something like that, so anytime a story comes along in their news feed with those keywords, it'll go into your special folder, only this is accessing government agencies?
Right, that's the basic idea. Searching on a particular phrase or collection of words is the core of the functionality. We have a few bells and whistles that make it so that, for instance, if you put in a citation to the US Code, there are a couple of different ways of making that citation. We want them all to be equivalent so you don't have to put in 3 different versions of that. Similarly, you can track a specific bill without worrying about the specific code words that are surrounding it. We want to make it as simple as possible for people to engage. But yes, the basic functionality is very similar to Google Alerts.
Do you need the cooperation of the federal government as a whole or particular agencies to sign off and say, sure, you want to monitor us more closely? We're going to set up the, you know, the whatevers to enable you to do it.
Well, fortunately, no. It's helpful whenever government wants to make their digital disclosures more accessible to us and do a better job of publishing it. But government moves slowly, and although Sunlight's been around for 6 years, that hasn't been nearly enough time for them to clean up all of their publications. So we've done a lot of work to take what is released and make it more accessible through the APIs that I mentioned. If they were to take a step backwards and, for instance, cease publishing the text of laws in a given state, then yeah, we wouldn't really have any recourse.
How do you know when you're making a difference at the Sunlight Foundation? You guys have been at this for a few years now, trying various tools, and we've talked about 2 of them here today, just to make government more transparent through the use of ever-evolving technology. What do you think some of your big successes are, and how do you even know when there is one?
Well, it can be difficult, I'll admit, to tell specific stories. I really like the small victories, ones like that FOI provision. I think that what we're here to do, though, is to empower the activism of others. Really, Sunlight is about making sure that government is more transparent and accountable. We want to open up the channel of communication between citizens and their government. We want to lower the costs to public interest lobbying and making sure that government is doing what we think it's doing. And by providing systems, we can ensure that that happens. I mentioned our APIs before. One of the main things that our APIs do is giving people information about what's going on in Congress, or based on their location, telling them who their elected officials are. We serve hundreds of millions of API calls to a variety of organizations every year who are offering these services through specific advocacy campaigns or mobile apps or whatever else to their users. And really what we're trying to do is just be quietly in the background, making sure that that kind of use and that kind of democratic function can be enabled.
All right, policy wonks, go forth and scout. Thank you for the service.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, it works a lot like the Book of the Month Club, but the books you get are for your Kindle, Nook, or iPad.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. Stop the texts. Stop the wrecks. Visit us at stoptextsstopwrecks.org.
I look up to a lot of the older heads, you know, the innovators, the heads of the art movements of the past. They kept it really edgy, and like a lot of the Latin American muralists and Latin American artists, and their styles were very unique and new to their time. You know, somewhat controversial, but that's who I look up to mainly. Personally, I'm very excited about going to college. It's something new and it's something different than what I'm used to. I'm definitely going to be a little out of my element, but that's what makes it so exciting is that, you know, it's something fresh. Well, there's so many opportunities that I think I could miss out on if I didn't go, you know? Getting into college takes planning and vision. You know, it's just like when I take a brick wall and turn it into a canvas for my art. Paintings help me realize that I've got what it takes.
Do your part. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank today.
Ebooks are, of course, making up an ever larger portion of book sales. So it only makes sense that a clever entrepreneur would come up with the idea of creating a Book of the Month Club-like subscription service for ebooks. Emily Gould is that entrepreneur. She has co-founded Emily Books, an indie bookstore on the web that offers a curated subscription service. Yes, it's web-based, but it's not computers making the selections about what you should read next month. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Who makes the selections?
I do. My best friend Ruth Curry and I do. We both have a background of working in book publishing, but also being writers and being a little bit frustrated that so many great books just fly under the radar. It's really hard to sift through the noise for the average reader. It's even hard to sift through the noise for me, and I live in New York, and I'm tapped into the network of free galleys and reading every book review imaginable. You know, I've New York Review, London Review, New Yorker, everything on my coffee table, but it's still hard to know what the thing is that is worth 9 to 12 hours of your life.
Right.
You know?
So in order to be included and to come onto your radar screen, the book actually has to be published as an ebook.
Oh, well, actually we convert books that don't exist in ebook format to ebook format sometimes when they're not available. Some of the books that we've selected for the book club have fallen out of print, so what we do is a little bit like, you know, the beautiful New York Review of Classics series that have the lovely end papers. It's a digital version of that. Finding maybe the overlooked work of the very celebrated author that nobody has the rights to it anymore, and we can kind of get it for the book club. But that's only part of what we do. There are also books that are just being published now that maybe their publishers are really excited about another book on the list, but there's not the budget, there's not the time to treat every book like it's The Art of Fielding, you know.
How does your subscription work?
You sign up, and then every month we send you an email, and it has a link in it, and you download the book from the link. So
you are being entrusted to pick a book, or are you giving your subscribers a list of books from which to choose, and what do they get for $13.99 a month?
You get the book that we give you. I compare it always to a CSA. You know, maybe you don't think you like kohlrabi, but there's a whole bunch of it in this week's bundle of stuff from the farm, so you're getting kohlrabi. And maybe you find that you love kohlrabi, actually, or maybe you don't. The great thing about ebooks, I think, I read them on my phone, is that if you kind of hate a book that you have downloaded, you can just delete it, and it doesn't sit on your desk staring at you and saying, why didn't you love me? And then you eventually cart it off to the Strand. You know, there isn't that guilt there. So for me, it's a way of sampling books. I still buy physical books a lot, actually. I shouldn't be. I have a really bad book habit, actually.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but this is helping to curb it. You know, it can sample things.
To do what you do for a living, you should have a very healthy reading habit, at very least.
I don't know if it's healthy, but yeah.
Because really what you're doing, it sounds like, is that you're being a book scout. We were talking about scout for policy wonks in the last segments. You're being a scout for readers and finding things that are out there that are not, you know, the top 10 bestsellers that everybody's going to see listed, but things that are worthy, that people who come to trust your taste may decide that you're a good scout for them on. Is that it?
I hope so. I mean, yes. It seems to be working so far. I mean, this will be our 7th month in operation. Every month we've gotten a whole new crop of people signing up for the subscription. It really surprised me. I didn't know whether anyone would go for this, actually.
That's great. Why do you think they're doing it?
I do think that there is this huge lack. I mean, Amazon has its totally algorithmic way of recommending books to you. Maybe you are lucky enough to have that one friend who has good taste, who's curious and always reading, but a lot of people don't have that friend. I do, and now I'm in business with her.
And now they have you.
Yeah.
Do you have a target audience, per se, do you think, demographically? I'm going for 25-year-old white females in Williamsburg, or, you know, how does that work?
I did think that that might be our target audience, but then when people started signing up, I realized that it's something completely different. It's older people of all ages, and a lot of them don't live in New York, because people who do live in New York are so glutted with book-related information. But people who live in maybe Charlottesville are, you know, who
crave it.
Yeah, they don't have anything like going, you know, I could go to a different literary reading every night of the week if I wanted to. And this is a way of having kind of that experience, but online and by proxy. It's also feminist, but I try not to lead with that.
And we'll get to that.
Okay.
We do notice a certain gender leaning in the books that you've been selecting so far.
Yeah.
But let's look at a page view from your site. I think we have this to put up right now. There's Emily Books. So tell everybody what they're looking at.
This is just our storefront. We also have a blog. You click on the book and it takes you to a little description of it. When you go to the blog, there are posts about the different books and sort of essays inspired by the themes of the books that don't necessarily have a lot to do with the books. You know, they're not book reviews, but a lot of the books, yeah, this is the blog. Sometimes people highlight passages that they've particularly liked from the books, and you can see that the person who's reading that book is reading it on their phone. Like that's an iPhone screen. Which is also what I like to do. Sometimes I'll screen cap, you know, a quote, and I'll email it to someone as a way of saying, this is the reason I fell in love.
That's great. Do you like to read on, why do you like to read on a phone more than a tablet? It's so small.
But carrying a tablet around with you on the subway, this is a very New York reason, but carrying a tablet around with you on the subway is just, I don't know, I can't manage to do it yet. I know a lot of people do, but it's just another thing to add to your bag. And my bag is already like this. I have like 10 tote bags with me at all times.
The books, that is very New York reason, you're right. The books you sell have no DRM, digital rights management. Explain what that is and why that's important.
I'll give it my best shot. Digital rights management is a form of, it's a very thin veneer of piracy protection that currently all of the major publishing houses, the big 6 publishing houses, require their books to be sold with, which functionally means that the only booksellers who are allowed to sell their ebooks are Apple and Amazon, which doesn't exactly work in the publisher's favor, and they know that now. They're starting to realize now that it doesn't actually benefit them to protect their books. They're protecting their books against piracy, which a lot of studies have shown that it's actually not a very big concern for ebooks. People aren't, you know, books have been traded and given out for free by libraries for years. People downloading books is not actually like a huge problem. What is a huge problem is book buyers only being able to buy books from a couple of giant corporations, whereas before, if you wanted to buy a book, you could support your local independent bookseller. So bringing independent ebook selling into being, and there are other people who are trying to do this as well. We're just sort of trying to do this in this kind of focused, small, very niche way, rather than setting out immediately to compete with Amazon by offering every book, which is like beyond my...
That's great. So do you compensate the authors?
Yes. We by working directly with the authors in some cases, we are able to offer them a bigger split of the proceeds than those companies do.
The feminist angle.
Right.
All the books so far on your list, is that 7 books over 7 months, are by women?
Yes, we always say that we will sell a book by an undiscovered male genius if someone can find us a truly undiscovered male genius. And then we're actually very, very open to that possibility, but so far, no dice.
There are probably some undiscovered male geniuses out there somewhere.
I think the New York Review is all over that already, but yeah.
Do you have your own favorite among the books that you've so far recommended?
I do. It's like picking a favorite child, but my favorite is Glory Goes and Gets Some by Emily Carter. This fabulous book. I have no idea why it's not, you know, people aren't shouting about this book from the rooftops. It was published 10 years ago, but Emily Carter is, she comes from a very literary family. Her mother's Anne Royfee, her sister, half-sister is Katie Royfee, her brother's, not brother, her cousin is Marco Roth, and like all of those people, she's written, well, it's not a memoir exactly, it's sort of thinly veiled memoir, and it's just devastating. This book is amazing, and it was published by a very small press. I mean, it got attention when it first came out, but it's not, you know, when we did an event with her, during the month that the book club picked her book, she told us that we had managed to sell more copies of her book that month than her publisher had in the intervening, you know, 8 years.
That's great. So somebody's looking in on what you're doing already.
Yeah,
and I guess that story also tells us it's not just new releases that you're linking to.
Yeah, it's a way to keep books from just falling off the shelf. Sometimes books come out and they have their 3 months of hullabaloo around them, and then everyone kind of forgets about them. We wanted to make them last, I
think
guess. So
many people in the book world have the fantasy of having an independent bookstore in a neighborhood somewhere, creating a sense of community. It seems like you have that dream. Have you been able to experience the community of it in the e-only world?
I think our army is massing its forces right now. I get a lot, but it is a little bit less satisfying than having those random interactions where someone comes into your independent bookshop and you get to just chat with them all morning. You know, it's the same things that we're doing, but just with social media, and so it's not as friendly and yeah.
All right, quick, tell people how to subscribe, then we're out of time.
Just go to emilybooks.com. It's pretty simple.
That's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Good
for
luck.
having me.
And that's it for this week's show. We roll out a new episode Wednesday nights at 7:30, or see us anytime at CUNY.TV. Next week, Underwater Robots. And check out my daily radio show weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC Radio. Tomorrow morning, Do's and Don'ts of Online Dating. That's 93.9 FM and AM 820 WNYC. Talk to you then.